Hello and welcome to another episode of the Oyster Live. Hope you're enjoying the start to your long weekend. And this morning I'm speaking with someone who you may have heard of before. So if you enjoy listening to marketing podcasts, then you've probably heard of my guest today. It's Justin Womack, co-host of the hit podcast Marketing Geeks. Justin specializes in podcasting, copywriting, email marketing, and Infusionsoft by Keep. He's also the owner of JMac Media, an online marketing service and consulting agency. Justin, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So I was listening to your podcast actually before this, and I was like, one of the things that I really love about you guys is you're really funny. Like it kind of feels like, you're sitting in the room with you kind of laughing along. Is that something that kind of came naturally to you guys, or is that something you had to work at?
That comes really natural to us. I don't have that dynamic with everybody, but with me and Andros have a really strong dynamic together, and we flow off each other really well. And we wanted to create something kind of almost like the Joe Rogan experience in terms of we're just there chatting, having a conversation. None of it's scripted. We're not even pre-scripting our questions for the guests. We just kind of go off the flow, go off the top of our heads, and whatever happens, happens. And that's what I think that makes it fun. So I have a good time doing it.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, tell us a little bit about your background, how you came to be in consulting, and what kicked off the idea for your podcast as well.
Well, my background in this type of industry was I got started working behind the scenes for a few high-level business coaches that were running their businesses through the seminar industry. So these were people that would put on events with about 100 to 300 people in the room. And from the stage, they would make offers anywhere from $25,000 to $100,000 from the stage for these high-level coaching packages. And so I got in kind of early on with a few of them, and I would run the back end of the business. So I would manage their CRM, which a lot of them were using Infusionsoft, which is now called Keep or Infusionsoft by Keep. Mm-hmm. It's a CRM software that I'm a partner with. So I'm a certified partner with that company. So I do a lot of work for that because people love Infusionsoft, but not that many people know how to use it. So or use it to its potential. But then also I got into, I've always been a writer. So even back all the way into high school, I was an honor student in writing and English and that kind of thing. So copywriting kind of came natural to me. Plus, I studied biopsychology in college.
Oh, right.
Biopsychology, which isn't really what I'm doing now, but part of that is you're studying regular psychology. And I learned a lot about, human decision-making, things like that. And that kind of curiosity helped drive later on when I wanted to study human behavior, and kind of with advertising and marketing. I think of that as the study of human behavior in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. We're looking at ways to influence, and so I've read books like Robert Cialdini, Influence. That's a great book. It talks a lot about the triggers of human behavior that help people that help you influence them. So those kind of things fascinate me. And I've read a lot of copywriting books. I've read the works of old school, David Ogilvy or Dan Kennedy, which is a little bit newer, but still that's he was back doing the direct sales letters, all the way up to some of the newer people that are writing copywriting and sharing their knowledge now. So I've just had a fascination for it. So ultimately my experience working in the seminar industry led me to creating my own business and doing this on my own. And I do a lot of freelance work as well. So you can find me on Fiverr as a Fiverr Pro. So if you're familiar with the website Fiverr, they have their regular Fiverr providers, and now they just launched a pro division last year. And I was the first person recruited to be a pro for email marketing. So
oh, wow.
for whatever reason, whatever the reason was, I was the first person on there as a pro for email marketing. And so the way that they run that is that as Fiverr, they start as a $5 per gig platform. It's very different than that now. As a pro, the lowest I'm allowed to charge is $100 for a gig.
Okay.
And then and they don't put a cap on it. So I usually have a starting package at $100, and it goes up from there. And so I do email copywriting through Fiverr. I do consulting for email marketing. I do podcast consulting, things like that. So that's where I'm at now. Plus I have my own agency. So you can go to jmacmedia.com, check out what I'm doing there. So that answer your question?
Awesome. No, I love it.
Yeah.
It's really funny because like what I find is a lot of people who are into marketing and advertising have actually done psychology or have done some sort of science in the past before. So I'm the same. I actually started off studying psychology, and then I was actually found it like a bit too like not sciencey enough.
Yeah.
As you can probably tell, I'm a bit of a geek as well. Some of the ways that research was conducted and stuff just frustrated me, and so I ended up moving into neuroscience and physiology. But I think, you know, it is really all about human behavior, right? Like that is what we're talking about when it comes to business, when it comes to marketing. And it actually...
It's funny you say that, though, because I agree with you on like psychology not being very sciencey. And I studied neuroscience too. That's what I mean. The degree at where I went to school, biopsychology, is neuroscience. They're one and the same.
Yeah.
But like if you've ever read the DSM, which is I guess that's only for the US, I guess, because they have the other one for the international. But the DSM is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Mental Disorders. And if you read through that, everything is so objective and there's like no science to it. To me, it's like it's all like perceptual. So, I mean, a lot of this stuff is very non-sciencey in psychology. So, I mean, when you get into psychiatry, that's like giving out the pills, and that gets more into neuroscience because, like, you know, pills are affecting different neurotransmitters, things like that. But psychology itself is pretty much observational studies, and there's not a lot of science to it. But it's interesting, yes.
Oh, no, I completely agree. It's very interesting. And I think that was actually one of the big things that turned me off. We use the DSM here as well. So
you do? Okay.
Yeah. And I remember reading it and just some of the, I was like, I remember going through and thinking like, I feel like I have like every pathology.
Exactly.
You know, you read like social anxiety disorder, I'm like, oh, I definitely have this. And then you read like bipolar, I'm like, oh, I definitely have this.
Yeah, but it's too easy to qualify for too many of those things.
Yeah, it's a little bit scary, isn't it?
It is. It is.
Now, the question I ask every guest on this show is, what is the biggest myth you've come across in your line of work? So what's your thoughts, Justin?
The biggest myth is that it's easy, I would say. I mean, that's like the one that comes up to the top of my head right there, is because there's so many gurus out there, so-called gurus, or that are out there preaching like how easy it is for anyone to go out there and start their own internet marketing company, or how easy it is for anyone to go out there and run a Facebook ads agency or run Facebook campaigns and just like print money. The reality is there's a lot of work involved. There's a lot of data analysis if you're going to do it successfully. I don't know a lot of people that have gone out on their first try and had a successful Facebook ads campaign. The majority of people struggle in the beginning and they adapt. And if they're actually measuring their data correctly over time, they start to have success. So more often than not, even with copywriting and things like that, more often than not, you get it wrong on the first try, and you have to adapt. You have to split test. You have to look at different things and make adjustments to your market. So I think I think what's happening is there's a lot out there of over enthusiastic information about just how easy it is for anyone to go out there and make $1 million. And I don't want to say it's not easy necessarily. It's not possible, because it's possible. But I think it's just there's a little bit more work than, and that's part of marketing. I mean, marketing is to make it sound as easy as possible because it makes it more attractive and you're more likely to buy it, right? So, so I understand the why. I just think that's a big myth that it's super easy to do this stuff on your own. So, I mean, you know, it's been a lot of trial and error for me, and here I am doing it for quite a while now, and I'm starting to feel confident. But every time I feel confident, then something changes, and you know, the whole industry flips on its head. So,
it is really tricky. I'm really glad you brought up that point, because it's something that you know, I spend a lot of time looking at what coaches are saying and consultants are saying about marketing, and it's become a real bugbear of mine to make. I get, like you say, I get why it happens. You know, oh, it's easy, but it's like it actually makes people, I think, feel like they're failures if they don't get it right. So it's like, oh, I spent my $2,000 doing my initial like test campaign on Facebook. I thought I learned what happened, and then I did the next one and nothing happened, and now I have no business and no money, and therefore I'm a failure.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, maybe that wasn't the best way to, you kind of need that one-on-one with someone, I think, to go,
Yeah.
where are you at? Like, do you have 10 grand in the bank? Do you have, like, is this your last $2,000? Like, maybe let's not just put that all into Facebook straight away. Like, it's going to depend so much on what that person's going through, and also what their strengths are, I think, as well.
Oh, big time.
Like, the thing I keep saying to my clients is, like, there are people like you, Justin, who have spent like years and years and years learning how this works. And like, it's a real specialty to even understand the data that comes out of Facebook with Facebook advertising is like a whole job. It's a hard job.
Yes.
And to kind of think like,
and one that will be regulated by artificial intelligence soon, I hope.
Oh, yeah, that would be nice. But it's I feel like when we, a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners stuff go, okay, I've got to learn like these, millions of different things. And it's like, well, actually, you might be better off investing in getting someone to help you rather than trying to learn from scratch.
Yes, definitely.
How to do this, how to do all this heavy lifting when if you're really great at public speaking or you're really great at consulting, like maybe that's your jam, and like don't like get someone else to help you with the other stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot to try to take on everything. I mean, I do think there's a lot of truth to that. You could take on a million trades, but you can really only master a few in your life. Because if you really put in the time, you're only going to become a master of a few things in your life. Now, you can be knowledgeable on a huge array of different topics, and I think that's a good thing. But like for me, that's why my sole emphasis in business is really copywriting. That's been the thing that I put probably the most amount of time into. And then the podcasting is a lot of fun for me. And that's become a big part of the business too, is podcasting and consulting on this. So these are like I'd say those are my two areas that put the most time into right now anyway. And that's been an evolution over time, because when I first started my agency, and I think part of marketing is messaging. My messaging was kind of way too broad. And I see this all the time. If you ever go to local chamber events, or I don't know what you have out there. I don't know if you have chambers of commerce in Australia. You do? Okay. Like even yesterday I went to an event, and it was, there was somebody there that's just like, my target market is anyone that could drink water, or my target market is anyone that, it's something ridiculous. It's like, okay, you haven't narrowed anything down. So, and it's funny and you get to laugh, but it's not going to work. It's like, so I think I just lost my track of thought there, but, but I mean, I do see a lot of that though. So you have to be able to kind of distill down and narrow down your audience as well. And speaking of one of the things I think is super counterintuitive is that if you narrow your audience more, you're going to have more success. Most people have this like fear of missing out. So if they narrow down their target market, they're afraid of the person that they're alienating from that. And they're afraid like, I'm going to miss this person. If I say that I'm only helping this small segment of people, I'm going to miss out on this person. Well, the reality is though, you're not speaking as clearly to anyone if you're speaking to a wide group of people, because your message gets watered down. But if you speak to a very small section of people, then you can be super specific to their problems. You can help solve a very small issue that only a certain section of people have. But that section of people that has that problem, they're going to want to go to the person that is speaking directly to them, not to the person that's messaging is talking to like all kinds of different things. So people want I can't always say that. Specificity. There it is. That's a tough one. They want that. And if it's not there, it's a problem. I had somebody on my podcast. Actually, it's the newest episode out right now. That was talking. He does family offices, which is like they target the super high net worth individuals. But he was talking about just how that's such a small market segment. So instead of, but it's got a lot of competition. But instead of going after that, he started becoming the thought leader of that market segment, and becoming the thought leader of that market segment positioned him to have a ton of success. And Yeah. So I guess I'm kind of rambling right now, but I think all that's relevant. Yeah.
We're all about the rambling. I like to let people, I've only been interviewing guests for a couple of months. So, maybe after this, you could give me some pointers. But one thing I've found is that sometimes it's better to just kind of let people talk. Because at the beginning, I was like, I have this like agenda and we go through all these questions.
Yeah.
But sometimes the things that come out are just, they just kind of happen. So ramble away.
Cool. Yeah, I go on like random rants, and then all of a sudden I'm like, wait, what did you ask me?
I do the same thing. It's bad because sometimes I do it to my guests, and I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm ranting now. What was I asking you? But this is actually a question I'm really interested in, and if you can humor me for a moment, because I think one of the problems we have, in a smaller country like Australia, like we have 21 million, I think 22 million, something like that.
More than that in California.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So like, I've done courses and stuff before that are based out of the States that focus on things like Facebook advertising, how important it is. And I'm like, look, like obviously I want to try to get out there to a global market. I think a lot of people listening to this are savvy enough to know that, you don't just have to limit it to your own country. Mm-hmm. But there is this sort of, I don't know, I think there's still this kind of disconnect that can be felt with, okay, but they're not even in the US, or they're not in the UK, or, who is this random Aussie girl with a pink lab coat talking to me, that kind of thing. So for, smaller countries, I feel like probably one of the big fears that we have with specializing, I know this is definitely the case for me, is I'm like, well, I help businesses. I help other people running businesses. That is quite broad. But I'm worried that, there are industries in Australia that it's like there's like 3 people in it, like it gets so small so quickly. What's your thoughts on that difference between, how specialized you go versus how specific the problem is that you solve?
Well, I think specialization is important. So I would go as specialized as possible. I understand that there might be some niches that are very too small, like you said, like 3 people. But if you're that specialized, then if you're serving multiple countries, like if you're going international, it's probably still a pretty small segment, even internationally. If it's that specialized in Australia, there's only like 3 or 4 businesses that are in that industry. So you're still, if your messaging is speaking to that type of business, it's still going to land with companies in other countries. I haven't had a ton of like cultural problems in terms of like me doing business overseas, like where there's not, in some cultures are different, that the messaging can land differently. People have different value systems, things like that. I haven't run into that too much, but I've done business with Australians. I've done business with UK, like some of the other European Union countries out there. I haven't done business with like Japan or China, and that I know that they have those value systems could be a little bit different in countries like that. But I think for the most part, like in my opinion, the messaging that works in the US for the most part is going to land in Australia, UK, European Union, because most of those cultures are similar enough. And if you've been there and you can share some stories about how you've traveled or you've helped people in other countries, that can help build authority and credibility for you to sell to people in those countries too. So what I would do is I would try, if I'm going to sell to Europeans, for instance, I would look for a client that I've helped or a story I could tell that's going to help connect me with that market a little bit stronger. Because I mean, marketing is a lot about storytelling. So if I can use a story to share how I help somebody in England or the UK to solve this problem and grow their business and then throw a very specific statistic at them, I think that's going to be they're going to land well. Awesome.
Well, thank you for exploring that with me. I knew I just threw that at you. So
no worries. Yeah.
So can we talk a little bit more about, we talked about this myth that, marketing's easy, this idea that marketing's easy. How do you think that affects people if people believe in that myth, if there's business owners out there thinking marketing should be easy, how does that affect them? Like this kind of misconception that they have?
Well, It does a couple things. It could give marketers a bad name, because if somebody buys an online course and they were sold it under the pretense that this is going to be super easy to learn and you're going to make your money back in no time, and let's say they invest like $2,000 in some sort of a course, whether it's online or a hybrid, online and in person, and then they don't get the result that they were promised, so they might take on a negative view of marketing, and that might be a filter that they deal with the rest of their life. Like they view marketing as evil or something like that because they were duped. So I mean, I think that's something to consider, is that the person's viewpoint of marketers it will be influenced if they had a bad experience. Can you say the question one more time? Because I had to really...
Yeah. So how does believing in that myth of, marketing is just easy, how does that affect the way that they do business?
Yeah. So I do understand that you said earlier how, like, if they believe marketing is easy and they can't figure it out, how that can make them feel bad about themselves too. How would that affect? I mean, the big thing is, I think that it can give a negative connotation, again, if they've been sold this and then they don't get the result. But if they believe that it's easy and then they haven't been able to figure it out for themselves, they're probably going to feel a little bit like the person that the influencers out there are holding stuff back. They're going to feel a little bit like that there's only, I don't know what it is, but there's always like this thing in marketing where you could give away all your information for free. And this is kind of a little bit of a tangent, but this goes to like coaching and seminars. Like I've seen some of these top seminar leaders that pretty much they have like a $25,000 program. Let's say they pretty much give all the information from that $25,000 program. They give it away for free on stage. But there's this like hidden thing in human minds that think like, well, if he has this amazing content, like what else is he holding back in that $25,000 program? Yeah. And then that sells them into the big program. And with the big program, they do get one-on-one, they get they get private time with the person, and they get extra coaching. But as far as like the big concepts go, they got them. They already have them. And so, so, I mean, I don't know. I mean, again, I think I've answered the question as best as I can in the beginning there, but that's just another thing that popped up in my mind. I just think, like, to reiterate, I think that if they have that belief and then they buy something and it doesn't deliver, they're going to have a negative view of marketing to go forward. And you see that a lot, like with people that believe marketing's evil, and it's most likely because they had a bad experience, and it's something like that would attribute to that bad experience. If they think it's supposed to be easy and they can't figure it out, it'll make them feel bad about themselves. It might make them feel dumb. It might make them give up their business dreams early on because they were sold that information, and then so they give up on themselves. So those are the potential consequences, I think, of that message.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Justin. Like, and thank you for going off on that tangent, actually, because I mean, there's thought leaders who will also say that too. Like, I've actually seen people go like,
I have
the same thing I've written in my book is exactly what we do in the course, which is exactly what I'm saying to you today. And they were quite candid about it, which I think is quite interesting, but there is this, I mean, psychologically speaking, there is something about paying for something and paying high value for something that makes you feel like it's more valuable, right?
Mm-hmm. And it also, if you put money behind it like that, you have a greater buy-in yourself to go do the work. So there's something about, if somebody invests $25,000 into a program, they're going to feel like, oh, wow, and now I have to do the work. I put all this money in. So they're more likely to get the result just by throwing that investment in there too. So that's also the case. Now, I was just at an event in traffic and conversions in San Diego in February, and Brendan Bouchard was on stage, and he did a short talk, and he was talking about, you know who Brendan Bouchard is? Are you familiar with him at all?
The name sounds familiar, but not too familiar.
He did a short talk though, and he was saying, like, I'm going to talk about this one concept. This is this exact same thing I give to my $25,000 clients. And I'm going to teach it to you right now. And he went through like step by step. Now, I'm sure he goes into more detail if you're in his $25,000 program. But he basically laid it out there, and like for the people that were at the fast action takers, they really could take that and do what they want with it.
Yeah.
But most people don't. Most people most people will absorb that, and they'd rather pay him to implement it for them because there's so much there that maybe they didn't process it all. Maybe they need help with certain elements, all these different things. But it's funny though, because these coaches give you they tell you what you're going to get, and they pretty much give it all to you, but people still pay. So, and they're still happy to pay sometimes.
Yeah, well, that's right. Like, I mean, if people are happy to pay, people are happy to pay, right? Like, I was thinking, as you were saying that, I was just reflecting on an article I'd read earlier this week. I think it came out in Australia. It was just about sort of like, I guess this is more like old school consulting world. So, like the people who go out in the suits and go into businesses and, put their strategy together and sell it. And
not the pink lab coat or the hat and t-shirt.
Yeah. And he was kind of saying, like, you can't just saying what a solution is isn't enough. You've got to go beyond that. You've got to be a leader within the team and help facilitate change. And I was thinking about it, and I was like, I agree with that, but I also don't agree with that, because I think the hardest part from my perspective, and I guess this is me putting my science hat on, is like it's really about working out what the problem is to begin with. Because I feel like there's a lot of advice out there that's like, here's a solution, here's a solution, here's a solution.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, great, okay, like, but is that going to solve what's actually going on, the problem that's going on for me specifically? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, if you're teaching from the stage or something like that, you can't get very specific. You have to give kind of like universal answers. And so you could do the best you can for what you could give, what you think is going to help the most number of people. But you're right, people are going to have specific situations that come up, and they're going to need more personalization. And I think the trend in marketing right now, though, is that we're moving into a more personalized type of marketing even. So even if you, like, again, I went to this event, Traffic and Conversions. It's considered a very big digital marketing event in the States and probably in the world. Are you familiar with the company Digital Marketer? Have you heard of them?
Yeah.
They sponsor this event. Basically, it's their team that created it. I think it just got bought by a third-party company that promotes it now, but they started this event. Okay. And so they talked a lot about how marketing is moving into personalization, and how even automated software is becoming more personalized or giving more personalized options. And like the email marketing that used to work, where we blast out to everybody and we kind of have a little bit of generic messaging, that's not landing as well as it used to in 2019, like it did in 2014 even. And so we're having to take our email list and distill it down into very small subcategories so that we can speak more specifically to people with specific problems, kind of like what you're saying. So I think everything is moving toward a direction where we're having to if we're marketing to, it's okay to market to multiple segments, but we need to identify who those segments are within our bigger list. And we need to speak differently to this segment versus this segment versus this segment. And that's becoming a bigger trend in marketing. And hopefully, and that's why with artificial intelligence and things like that coming down the pipeline, they're hoping that can help to kind of identify those distinct differences. But in the meantime, it's really all about, are you segmenting your email list? Are you tracking like this? Are you actually tracking your audience's problems? Are you asking those questions, doing survey research, things like that I think are important. So I just think that marketing is moving into the specific category, so that the generic answers, like you were saying, that you were getting maybe for a problem, are no longer selling programs like they used to. So yeah. we need specific answers to sell the bigger programs.
And it's funny, isn't it? Because I think once people have the expectation of personalization, they don't want to go back to not, like, they can. It's too jarring. Like, it's like once you have something good, you don't want to let it go. Like before we had running water, we were fine with not having running water. But once we have it, we're like, who would not have running water,
Yeah. And in marketing, and you go back like 20 years, or maybe, about 20 years, I'd say, like in the late 90s, you got an email that had your first name in it, and it was like, oh my God, it's personal, because they have my first name, and nobody knew about like merge forms or automation like that. So back then that was cool. Now you open your inbox, and if you're anything like me, I have like 50 50 emails that are marketing messages, and half of them are cold emails that I didn't even opt in for.
Yeah.
That they just bought my information from somebody. Yeah. So, and that kind of thing just doesn't work right now. So it might work at like a fraction of a percentage for your, you send out 100,000 emails, you might sell one thing, yeah. but it's really not working like it used to for people. And so the marketers that are going to win in 2019 and beyond are the ones that are really going to segment their list, understand their audience, and speak to specific market segments. That's my opinion.
I love that. And I was thinking, you were mentioning a few books earlier on. The one that I think is actually, it's an old book, but it's so good, is How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie.
Oh, yeah. That's a good one. I just reread that last year. Yeah.
Oh, I have to reread it actually, because I haven't read it for ages. But he says like the most I can't remember exactly how he says it, but it's sort of like the best sound someone can hear is the sound of their own name. Yes. And we really are. I think one thing, sometimes I actually email people who've written to me like with their cold email or whatever, and I'm like, like, hey, like you spelled my name wrong. Like you put a hey there. Or
big
like
big no.
It was like, hey buddy, and I was just like, what? Like, why would you send that? And you kind of go like, okay, like I don't remember who you are. Like I don't know why you're sending me this email. Like I have no context. Like it's really important, I think, that we remember. One of my friends who used to be in the army, actually, he said this to me. He's like, people really just think about themselves, like they're not really conscious of you and what you're doing. And I think we forget that. I think we forget that even if someone's seen our video, they've been on our website, they've connected with us on Facebook or LinkedIn, they don't necessarily, most likely they don't remember who we are.
I think that's true more often than not. Yes. And I think, people are self-interested. I think that's a big thing. And it's a driver of human behavior is self-interest. And if you go on Facebook, you see it a lot. Like go on Facebook here and see how many comments you get, and you'll get a lot.
Yeah.
Like, I want you to promote your business on this link here, and like people just like, you get 100 comments, 200 comments, or like even if you share your podcast link here, and you'll get a ton of comments because people want to promote themselves. They want they're self-interested. So if I say, I have a question, please answer this question for me, they're going to get less responses because they're helping somebody else.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you can use that though. I mean, so if you want to get engagement on your Facebook, ask people to talk about themselves, and you'll see a tremendous increase in engagement. And it's kind of funny, but it's true. And so that's, but that can also be used as it can also be used in other ways. So that's why also though in webinars and sales presentations, when people talk about, that's why it's so important to build up this belief system that these people are able to succeed and achieve their dream through your program, and tying their ultimate goal to your program. And so you'll see a lot of things like, and this gets into psychology a bit, or are you familiar with NLP at all? Like, neuro-linguistic programming. And this is sort of like that, but like even like using statements that are like, imagine yourself a year from now. Imagine we're having this conversation a year in the future, and you've gone through this program and you've solved your biggest problem. Now, like, money in your bank account, and you're getting them to like kind of future pay.
Sorry, Justin, you just cut out there. Can you just say that we were like on a cliffhanger?
Okay. Sorry. So. Yeah, so I'm saying, so imagine like we're using kind of language to build up a dream in somebody, but if I want to tie my program to that dream, I might say something like, imagine we're having this conversation a year in the future. You've gone through my program. We've solved your biggest problem. Like, how much money do you have in your bank account now? What kind of car are you driving now? What are you wearing now? How are you feeling now? Like, how is your life different than it used to be now that you solved this problem and you've been able to move forward with your life? And asking questions like that can like open up this realm of possibility for people, and they start visualizing themselves having this success. And it's a great sales tactic. It works really well, but it also speaks to that principle of self-interest. They're not really interested in you. They're interested in achieving that dream, and which is, I guess, in anything that makes sense. But
Absolutely.
yeah.
Well, I feel like you have like packed this episode full of like great advice, but obviously it doesn't have to end here for people. They can come and listen to your show as well. Tell us a little bit more about what you guys explore on your show, and what our listeners might be able to gain from listening to you guys as well.
Yeah, so the podcast again is called Marketing Geeks, and if you want to listen to it, you can go to marketinggeekspodcast.com. That'll link to like iTunes and Stitcher and Spotify and all the different networks. You can just find links there. But the podcast itself is really, it's exploring everything in terms of marketing, like all the topics that we can think of. So we have like, I cited that book Influence by Robert Cialdini. We actually, early on in the Marketing Geeks episodes, we did like a 6-part mini series where we broke down all of his principles of influence. So we did an episode on each one of them. And so like we do episodes on that. We've done episodes on copywriting, webinars, episodes on like LinkedIn and social media. So all these different topics from a wide range of things. And then more recently, we've kind of, in the first 40 episodes, or probably first 35 episodes or so, we rarely had guests on the show. It was pretty much just me and Andros, my co-host, like teaching and just having conversational episodes. And then more recently, we've shifted now to have a lot of professional guests on the show. And that's partially because we're getting so many inquiries of people that want to be on the show now and want to promote. So we're doing that, and it's also it brings variety to the show too, so that it doesn't get stale to have a third person on there. But it's a lot of fun. Like we're bringing on some high level people. We're going to have John Lee Dumas on, who he runs the company eofire.com, and he's going to be on an episode that I'll release next week. We just interviewed somebody that's big in the virtual reality and augmented reality space. The episode that's currently out right now is a person that's marketing to like the top 1% of wealth in the world. And he runs something called family offices, which means that like he'll dedicate an entire team to one family, because that family is worth like $100 million or more. And they need financial advice much stronger than the average person, because they make a mistake, then it's a huge deal for them to make a mistake, versus like somebody with not a lot of net worth. They can make a mistake in their investment strategy and not pay huge consequences. So we have a variety of experts. We cover a variety of marketing topics. We have a lot of fun doing it, and and I think that's my plug for Marketing Geeks.
Awesome. No, I like I said, I was listening to it, and I just felt like I was laughing along with you guys, which I think is always a great sign for a podcast. You kind of feel like you can laugh along with it and you're like part of the conversation. That's awesome. So keep doing awesome stuff, Justin. Thank you so much for joining us. Like, I don't think I've had someone like pack this with so many different pieces of marketing advice all together. So I really, really appreciate that. And you've said your website, so I will put that in the show notes as well. I'll make sure everyone can check out what you guys are doing, and I look forward to continuing the conversation.
Awesome. Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Justin.